So May of 2007, right here in Austin, I got to give a speech, a keynote speech, that I called the Oreo Doctrine. And I mean, a few of you, probably a small handful of people in here may have been here in that room or read some of the things, a couple of one back here. So the premise behind the Oreo Doctrine was that I was seeing from my perch in the business, I was seeing things start to schism. I was starting to see things sort of break apart in our business, and for the business to sort of to begin to divide into sort of two camps. So I needed a handy metaphor, so I used the Oreo cookie. And the idea behind the Oreo Doctrine was that, just like an Oreo cookie sort of being spiraled open, you had the two sides of our business sort of, taking on these two different places. So the two sides of the business that I identified back then during that speech, I called them transaction and marketecture. These were my sort of made-up names for what I was seeing. The transactional side of the business that I sort of posited at the time was going to be about the business of message distribution. So getting the right message out, sort of the trafficking of ad units around the web that was just exploding at that point. The key skills on that transactional side were going to be negotiation and optimization. The people who could sort of manage that supply chain better than others would do the best. Really, the thing that was going to drive the success of that side of the business was the ability for the ad agency, holding companies, and others to do profitable buying. It was about taking cost out of the buying system. This was the science of how many. How many people are we reaching? How many ads are we serving? How many clicks are we getting? And so forth. Math and science ultimately were going to be the mediators in this business, right? It was going to be really, it was going to be about who could import the best engineers and scientists and left-brain thinkers. Ultimately, though, this side of the business could only exist around standardization. We can only have a commodity and automated trading and that kind of thing around units and advertisements that were in some ways standard, be it a 15-second pre-roll, a leaderboard, what have you. This side of the business that I predicted would ultimately become exclusive and controlled. And yes, there are still a lot of logos on Terry Kawaja's Lumascape charts, but if you really look at it, the business is getting much more sort of control-based. It's getting into fewer and fewer hands. I mean, I see Google and a couple of other companies that are going to sort of challenge them in that area, but there won't be a million companies dealing with the transactional side of our business. There will be a relative handful. And then finally, this is the business of sell to me, right? Sell me your supply, sell me your data, et cetera. Now, flipping over to the other side of the cookie, we have marketecture. Marketecture is not about message distribution, it's about message enhancement. It's not about, rather than negotiating and optimizing, we have to have the people who have the skills to collaborate and build with customers. We're not just talking about profitable buying, but we're talking about the overall profit of a project, right? So it's about sort of defining the R in ROI for our customers. Not how many, but how powerful. How can we make the advertising smarter? How can we make it more impactful? How can we make it bolder? How can we use it to do things like drive loyalty? Relationships and contacts were going to matter a lot more on this side of the business, right? Whereas the harsh glare of accountability and attribution and other spotlights were going to shine on the transactional side, we'd have some room to move here, right? We could really sort of build through our relationships. And finally, while the transactional side of the business would thrive around standardization, this side of the business, again in my 2007 thinking, would function and thrive in relative chaos. This side is inclusive and networked, and ultimately it is the science of build with me. So again, snapshot in time from 2007, I kind of looked at this. It wasn't a completely unique idea at the time, but I tried to give it shape and have people start to debate sort of what was going to happen as the business sort of schismed and split into these two distinct skill sets and economic models. Fast forward a little bit into the intervening handful of years, right? The 5 years between 2008 to 2012. Really, I started to sort of think about it not so much like this artificial cookie metaphor, but I really started to think that our business has two brains, a left brain and a right brain. And as we break it down, the left brain side of our business ends up being about audience, right? It ends up being about about finding the right consumers, building out those audiences. And so much of the business, what we see in ad exchanges, the automated, the trading desks, the automated networks, demand-side platforms, DMPs, and so forth. You're seeing this side of the business really become a business unto itself. On the other side, we have the business of experience, right? So this is sort of the evolution in the thinking around marketecture. And if you think about this side of the business, this is where creative and storytelling seem to live, unique content experiences, brand integrations, promotions, and so forth, right? And of course, following this right down the pipe and distilling the message to the buzzwords, this side of the business represents programmatic, whereas the experiential side of the business, we've come to sort of associate more with native. And I kind of reject those two themes, those two labels. I find them far too limiting for what's really going on there, and they become sort of lazy intellectual devices for us to sort of cram a lot of things into. But it's a great place to start our conversation here and really talk about what's possible and what's in front of us. Unfortunately, instead of covering the issues, we choose to cover the horse race. We all love a good fight. We all love a good dust-up. It's kind of the same way we cover politics. We don't talk about sort of the real sort of deeper merits of healthcare and economic policy and environmental policy. That's boring, boring, boring. We'd rather talk about the gaffe on the campaign trail. We'd rather talk about who hates who, the backfight, the infighting in Washington. But we're getting more and more stories like this, right? We seem to crave the stories that are about division. Now notice that the title of the summit, right, the actual sort of theme of the summit, is not Mad Men versus Math Men. It's Mad Men plus Math Men. That's a really important distinction. That plus sign says a lot about what we want to accomplish up here on the stage and throughout the next 2 days. We crave and light up when we see quotes like this from John Hegarty, right? John Hegarty, the chairman of Bartle Bogle Hegarty in London, and one of the old, certainly a throwback to the sort of Mad Men era. I'm not sure I want people to know who I am. I find that slightly Orwellian, and I object to it. I don't want people to know what I drink in the morning and what I drink at night. To those brands that say I understand you, I say fuck off, you don't understand me. Mind your own business. I don't want to be understood by you. Potty mouth. So, I put that up there to make it okay for you, Tamara, so just F away when you get up here. So here we've got sort of like the line in the sand being drawn by a creative, and we see just as many on our side. We see technologists stand up at conferences like this and effectively tell us that context doesn't matter anymore. They tell us that it's really just all about getting to the right person at the right time, and the contextual relevance, the creative message matters less. It's just fuel for the fire. Well, the positions that get scoped out in this, right? We put people on stage because they evoke one or the other, right? But the positions themselves have become caricatures. And obviously on the right brain side of our business, the creative side of our business, we tend to, obviously Don Draper has become the patron saint of that. I mean, how many of us in our business go home on Sunday nights and watch Mad Men, an hour of ad porn so we can tell ourselves we're in a sexy creative business still, right? On the other hand, the data side of our business has been caricatured as well, right? The math men are sort of dismissed as like non-creative, sort of very, very linear thinkers, very sort of left brain, extremes, and so forth. So these positions have become caricatures in our eyes. So my purpose up here, what I've prepared for and what I hope gets accomplished up here on stage and then throughout the next 2 days, is that chasm begins to actually close. Because for any of you who have read any sort of right brain, left brain treatises, and I think that one of the best is Daniel Pink's book, A Whole New Mind, where he talks about the fact that none of us just thinks with our left brain or just turns that off and thinks with our right brain. In order for us to function as human beings, we have to have both sides of the brain inform one another, right? And I think that's a great metaphor and a great way of thinking about where we are right now as this business. As long as these two things are sort of pulling in opposite directions, as long as we have this manufactured crisis, this artificial war, nothing gets better, right? We are, a house divided cannot stand in our business. And ultimately, if we keep fighting, left brain of digital business keeps fighting with the right brain of digital business, and we have these sort of extreme positions staked out, guess who wins? Television. Just becomes the default is going to win. Let's just go back to what we know. This is bullshit. It's all just too hard. There's too much fighting. There's too much strife. I don't need this. So that chasm begins to close today. That's the goal. And I think that the opportunity, we need a new metaphor for right now, and the metaphor that I chose here is the Tao. And I think anybody that's ever sort of even had a passing interest in spirituality or religion is going to recognize this concept. It's become one of those sort of universal totems that everybody sort of grafts things onto. But if you think about the Tao, it's a very simple concept, right? In all light there is darkness, in all darkness there's light, right? There's always an element, there's always a trace of the opposite in the center of everything. So effectively what we've got is we've got the data side, the left brain side of our business, but now thinking about serving experience and creation. We're thinking about the creative message. We're thinking about the creative outcome. On the other hand, we have a data side, and it's not filled with people like John Hegarty. It's not filled with the sort of the creationists of the creative world. Rather, it's filled with people who are very informed and are thinking about how that creativity can be informed by data, how we can start to write the best copy and create the best experiences in the world for consumers because we know about them, because we know about the context in which they're living. So I have the opportunity to bring up two people who really represent sort of these two sort of sides of the Tao, right? And I think these people are not here because they stake out the extreme positions, but rather because they're both already leaning in to the middle of the picture, into balance. So I'm going to really quickly, I'm going to introduce them when they come up here, but Tim Souther from Axiom, Alistair Green from Team 1, come on up, guys. Welcome.
We've never met before.
All right, gentlemen. So first of all, I'm going to do the briefest of introductions. Alistair, Executive Creative Director for Team 1. Marriott. What else we have?
Lexus.
Marriott, Lexus, of course. How did I forget Lexus? Häagen-Dazs.
And some entertainment clients.
And a few entertainment clients based in Los Angeles. And by the way, a quick aside to everyone here, just a public service announcement. If the lights go down and you hear a fire alarm, we're all going to follow Alistair out of the building. Just keep his shoes in sight, right? They'll be your beacons. I'm sorry, they just switched the slides up here in front of me, and I got a little bit disoriented. Tim Souther, Axiom is a company that's been around for 40 plus years. They've handled some of the biggest databases in the world for the biggest clients in the world. Tim has been on board as their CMO for the last
8 years.
The last 8 years, and he was voted one of the top 1% of CMOs in the country. So, round of applause for a tremendous job of very hard work. So we have quite a bit to accomplish up here, and I'm going to start with just sort of getting your reactions to the to sort of the extremes of the business, right? What are some of the statements? Let's talk about what we should stop doing first. What are some of the cringeworthy things that people say on either the creative side to you, or what do data and analytics people say to you that kind of make you cringe? Do you think the things that sort of keep us apart and manufacture this ongoing strife? Let's start with you, Alistair.
I personally hate it when I get given literally one insight for a campaign and people won't actually show me the whole data set. So I hate it when people have actually already distilled things and they won't let me kind of get in there and actually see what else I can find.
So you don't want them to sort of like give you the hand-selected data point that you think is important. You want to see the whole data set.
Well, I don't want to see the whole data set because I'm not like Tim. I don't have that huge brain. But I would like to actually have some options. I'd like to be able to actually at least kind of understand why that thing, because sometimes when things are distilled to a very, very complete point, it misses out the entire journey, the whole narrative of that point.
Mm-hmm. So you think there's a bit of intellectual laziness in the presentation of data?
Sometimes.
Okay, fair enough. What makes you cringe, Tim?
Well, I cringe when I hear how data is killing creativity. So of course stories need data to be efficiently timed and placed and often messaged, But I think people forget about the other side, that for data to be really meaningful, data needs stories. So as opposed to thinking about this as a zero-sum game, I actually think your plus metaphor is actually right on. You know, together, data and creativity can make advertising more powerful and can make the experience more powerful.
So, hey, Rick, would you put up the John Hegarty quote again? So, obviously, there are still some cultural barriers that exist. I mean, I called this one out because I wanted to sort of use this as a touchstone for sort of one of those moments in time that seem to kind of drive the wedge and sort of keep the two sides apart. So, Alistair, I want to just ask you first, because since you're since you're aligned with the creative, side of the business, how real is this, how real is this behavior? Is this something that's still dominant on the creative side of the business? Are there a lot of mini John Hegartys out there, or is he sort of a call from the distant past?
Oh, definitely on the latter. It's definitely a call from the distant past. When I first entered like the advertising kind of realm, you go back like 15 years ago, this was the predominant view in my mind from the creative side, was essentially, you look at TV, in TV world, you literally can do a whole campaign with like 2 or 3 people from an agency. Now in the digital world, we need like 100 people. You need to be able to actually kind of bring people along. So it's that you still need to have a vision and everyone needs to understand that vision, but to be able to actually say, it's my way or the highway, not one person can know it all anymore. So now you have to actually trust and you need to be able to actually talk to your entire team. So I can't believe that John Hegarty can actually know everything that's going on within his organization and all of those single points. So I don't know how he can actually have that single point of mind to be able to actually say, this is what we need to do.
And I think the key to this is to know your truth, right? So if you're on the creative side, I mean, do you want to embrace this or do you want to reject it? So I think, so you've heard about digital natives and digital immigrants. I think there are data natives and data immigrants and data isolationists. So for me, I would start with your truth. I mean, which is from a personal perspective, do you see data as opportunity or do you see it as threat? And I would pose the same question from the company that you work for. Is data a friend or is it a threat? And I think that will help to guide you in terms of the way that you want to deal with data. And I would posit that for the most of you, is that data offers this enormous opportunity to make the creative attributes that you deliver so much more powerful, not just in the advertising, but in the experience of the product and service that you offer to the marketplace.
It seems to me like the thing that's missing out of, when I see quotes like this, and I've seen many over the years, and people get up at conferences and they become sort of the data deniers in these instances, it seems to me purely reactive, right? I think what's missing here is a real point of view from John Hegarty about what the data should do, right? So in other words, I think that, and I don't know if you'd agree with this or not, Alistair, but like, do creative people sort of come in with a point of view about how they want data to serve them in the creative process?
I'm just going to laugh right now. I'm just thinking, the whole of the room, who's actually had a creative come in and say, this is what we're going to do, without even listening to you? I'm pretty sure that's happened a few times, probably within the last week. Yes, I want to come back to your question. I wanted to make that point. That a lot of creatives actually already know what they want to do without actually taking all the evidence and actually being able to actually find the actual truth in there. I like your point, Tim, about that truth. Also, I want to come back to the other point of essentially people like John Hegarty are becoming less and less because that mindset is actually retiring from the business. And hopefully you have a few people a bit more like me who want to kind of like find out a little bit more about what's going on and are open to different opinions from different people. Maybe even media people, who knows?
So with every retirement party, the future speeds up, eh?
A little bit, yeah.
All right.
And wouldn't creative be much more powerful if you had insight into what people were thinking, whether they were optimistic or pessimistic or price sensitive or fashion forward? And wouldn't your creative be a lot more powerful if you had deep insight into whether or not people would actually consider your category or whether they favor a competitive brand or whether they're in market or if you had understanding how they shop versus they buy? Of course they would. So again, the idea of having the add to the equation as opposed to the or is absolutely right on.
I love the phrase I heard from a futurist a few years ago. He said, it's a both and world. right? Stop thinking or, start thinking both and. It's like we have to figure out a way to do both.
Indeed.
Rick, you can dump this slide and go back to the camera if you would. We want to get rid of him. Rick, you back there? There he is. Okay. So one of the questions I want to ask you is that, we still are kind of a house divided, right? I don't think I think one of the reasons why people come here and fill this ballroom is not to sort of celebrate how incredibly wonderful everything digital is, but rather because none of us are terribly satisfied with, with the status quo. So why are we not doing better work? What are the impediments to us sort of doing better work? Let's leave aside the balance between these two sides, but what's preventing these two sides from coming together and creating sort of these greater experiences that you talk about, Tim?
Well, I think part of it has to do with the caricatures and the extreme positions that people have posited about data and creative. When they are working, together, they can certainly, deliver a lot more value. And speaking from the data side, I think oftentimes when data gets into the equation, it does an awesome job of telling you what was, or maybe what is. And the more that you take data and think about, well, what's likely to be, now you're in the realm of where creativity and data work best together. On the data side of the equation, we are huge fans of having a rapid, iterative process to testing, and that needs creative, to do that right. Great creative provokes the mind, and data can provide the underlying testing methodology to help you determine how well that's working. So the more that you look forward, the better opportunity there is for data and creativity to work together.
Isn't part of the problem, Alistair, that we're still handcuffed and yoked to these kind of brain-dead short-term metrics? I mean, are we too focused on kind of the immediate metrics that are easy to explain to clients? Is that maybe one of the things that's holding us back?
Definitely from my personal point of view, I hate the click-through rate. I'm pretty sure most people in the room kind of are fed up with it.
We have an amen.
Because it was the easiest thing to measure. That's all we're measuring. And as soon as you actually fixate on that CTR, then we create creativity. We create, basically, if we're going to go to the display banner or even tap-through banners on mobile work, we're trying to optimize for that click or that tap. And therefore, we end up with those kind of banners that, what term did you use before?
Trick-through.
The trick-through rate?
Yeah.
It's that kind of trying to trick people to actually click on things.
Yeah.
And I've been doing this for so fucking long now that you end up with this. Every time we see new media come in, we see those response rates being really high, and then they kind of come lower and lower and lower. And we're always amazed by new things. I think that's one of the reasons why I do creative, why I'm in the creative side, because I'm obsessed about new things. If you look at my bank account and how many gadgets I buy, it's all about new things for me. But the just being totally 100% obsessed about that click-through rate is just damaging the creative. I prefer, or the way we've been producing work in Team One is we're starting to make those display ads much more like billboards on the side of the 405 or whatever roads. Something that you can actually see very quickly. And looking at things from a branding point of view, it's one of the reasons why I actually personally prefer more of those kind of brand awareness studies for actual measurement, because I think it actually is easier to actually look across the media spectrum.
But I guess one of the things that always gets me about this is that are we just sort of trading one set of handcuffs for another, right? I mean, is it still sort of give us something immediate that's easy to understand? So talk about brand lift, et cetera. And I know that stuff's important, and I know that ultimately when it all goes video, we'll sort through that stuff. But rather than talk about just attribution, which seems to be sort of the obsessive issue, I want to think about kind of vision. So what are some of the visions that we should really be chasing? When you think about sort of what gets you out of bed in the morning, and why you're in this business to start with, what's that vision that we can share with customers to say that's with marketers to say that's the point on the horizon we should be going to?
Right. So before I answer that, I want to just focus on the attribution thing just for a moment. So if we allow attribution to simply mean the last impression that someone's seen and it gets all the credit, that obviously sucks, right? But it isn't good enough just to call it out that it sucks, right? You've got to have a level of indirect attribution to be able to identify how awareness ultimately leads to people buying things. So I think we need a more sophisticated view of attribution, and having not only the right strategy for that, but the underlying data that supports that will make your creative be more valuable, and you'll be able to prove it to your clients. Now, in terms of vision, to me, what's really struck me is, if you think about data or even creative, I mean, most of what it's been used for is to create compelling advertising or to ensure that it's timed and placed and measured appropriately. And for that, I say, God, is that all that there is? Does data and creative have to be external to the product or the service? I sure hope not. I think about what Nike has done with the Fuel Band, or what Disney is doing with the Magic Band, or what FedEx is doing with delivery preferences, or what Fitbit is doing, or what Match.com is doing. They all are having data and creative as intrinsic to the service. It's fundamental to the service and product. The product cannot exist without it. And I think the opportunity of using data and creative, not just to surround the product and to advertise it, but to make it fundamental to the way that our customers experience our product or service. Now that is like a super, super powerful opportunity. And I think we're just getting started with that.
So if I can just grab the essence of that, I think it's kind of like, we've been obsessed about kind of help me run a better campaign. We're using data to say, help me run a better campaign, help me drive a better response rate. The call we should really be answering is, help me be a better marketer, help me build a better product.
That's right, and help me, frankly, advance humanity, do something good for people.
Yeah, I'm actually gonna quote you, because I thought this was a really terrific quote. Consumers expect connected interactions, better life experiences for people, and better marketing for the companies that serve them. I thought that was a terrific, I appreciated reading that, and I thought that was a nice sort of vision statement for sort of what data-enhanced creativity could all be about. So Alistair, what's the so jump in on the conversation here. What do you think is the vision that we should be chasing?
I'm actually going to go back. I have a more interesting one, hopefully. What gets me out of bed?
More interesting than my question.
Well, kind of.
I'm good with that.
I have it fucking prepared, and I've been thinking about it. What gets me out of bed in the morning? I just make fucking cool shit. That's what I want to do. I really love it when you just see something and you go, oh, that's just so fucking cool that I just want to share it. It's those kind of remarkable pieces of kind of branding content.
But is it cool shit because nobody's ever done it before? Or is it cool shit because you're taking something that the consumer really wants to do and finding a way to help them do it better? You
can do that. You can definitely, like, brand as enabler is something I love. I absolutely love, like, the Nike Fuel Band. I actually have a Fitbit and a Nike Fuel Band. And if you think about it, everyone knows about this thing. But this is essentially that brand as enabler. This is like just do it for our generation. But
just do it and know exactly what you did and how fast.
Absolutely, and it's like data in the service is me. Right. In the service of me, which is Tim and I, we were talking over breakfast this morning. That's what we actually love. There's something intrinsically cool about this, but I love the picture of the fat kid running. I love that movie, that Find Your Greatness spot. That's also intrinsically cool. And I think for me, it's like that's that part of that storytelling where you just connect emotionally with someone, and you instantly know it. It could be the most amazing media partnership. It could be those kind of, that incredible creative piece that slots nicely into that media schedule. Mm-hmm. It's just something when you kind of have that emotional reaction and you go, wow, I wish I knew the people who made that, or I wish I was the one who made that.
Making cool shit.
Is that a good enough answer?
I love it.
Okay.
Hey, Rick, can you go back to the slides for a minute? Because we're going to shift gears for just a moment. Rick?
He hates you right now.
There you go. All right. So shift doesn't just happen. And so I said at the outset that we wanted this session to really kick off the conference and to kick off the conversation. So we've had our sort of bit of focus panel time up here. And what we'd like to do now is sort of move into sort of phase 2 of this, which is going to get you guys talking at your tables, right? So we're going to sort of prompt a 10-minute scrum session at each table to talk about and sort of brainstorm 2 or 3 answers to a question I'm going to give you in just a moment. We're going to come back and we're going to harvest some of those insights. And just jump ahead here. Here we go. So I'm going to actually have each of our panelists sort of offer up one of their answers. But the question that you're going to debate at your tables is going to be this one. and only 10 minutes for this. I want 2 or 3 specific tactics, rules, best practices that you think would allow data and creativity to work more seamlessly in your organizations or between you and your clients, okay? Or the other players that serve them. I know who you are, but they don't.
Okay, I'm Sean X, Amazon Advertising. One of the things that we wanted to state is we kind of have a problem with the premise of data and creativity to begin with. That data is the cerebral cortex. And
how ironic that you and Jim would be at the same table and end up sort of debating the validity of the question. That never happened before.
No, we were basically saying, is our industry fundamentally flawed for advertising? We're great at marketing, but when he mentioned what he remembered about Nike, he mentioned the fat kid running. He remembered that impacted his limbic system. That's what he remembered. That's the emotional connection.
And I do wear one of these.
You wear one of those.
And I queued up for it before I even saw that.
Exactly, but that's marketing. That's like, what's my attachment to data and marketing? So basically what we were saying, when data can inform information that allows us to create digital advertising that impacts us emotionally, then the data is valuable. If the data doesn't do that, then it's superfluous to what we're trying to create.
Okay. Yeah, and I don't disagree with you that we're better at marketing than we are at advertising, but I actually see it in a broader context than just the power of the creative. So more to come on that at cocktails. Who else? Let's get another one. Back here.
Hi, Josh Oken from FCAM. I'm actually a creative. So
You're not alone.
All right. The big thing really from my perspective, because it's a full service shop that I work at, and what we talked about is really collaboration before and after execution, making sure that interdisciplinary planning is really a part of the process. So that would include data, creative, and media. And then on the measurement side of things, making sure that you have that same interdisciplinary team in the room to hear that information so that they can make informed decisions moving forward.
So quick poll of the room here. So how many people, raise your hand if you work for an agency and it's a full service agency where you have all those titles in the same room. Raise your hand now put those down and raise your hands if you work for an agency that's not full service, that's where you've got to deal with people who don't have your business card. So yeah, that's one of the questions that I was asked. I agree, and Alistair works for a full service shop as well, and so getting the people to the table and sort of forcing them to sort of play nice with each other. How do you do that if you're...
Alcohol.
Okay, I know how you do it, but how do you, do you have, and I'll throw this out to you as well.
Yes.
How do you do that if you're not all carrying the same business card?
Well, one of the things our agency has done is built a process that is around getting paid for ideas and strategy up front, and within that moment in time, you have the opportunity to assess the project or problem at hand and bring in all of the potential contributors to solving that problem, whether they're in the shop or outside of the shop. And so it's a chance to go find partners that may be vendors or whatnot.
So you're sort of upstream in the decision point close to the client, and that's a chance where the client can say, all right, listen, this is my vision, I share it with Josh, and so everybody
and
get
then
your
we
shit
go
together.
and say, okay, here's the best people to help solve this problem.
Great, thank you for that. A couple more. Catherine, back there.
Jeff James with Signet Interactive. I'm the Chief Alcoholic Officer of the company.
All right.
I think I would actually confer with my colleague over there and about the data on both sides and making it an iterative part of the process. But I think one of the things I got out of the statements that were made was that needing to hit the reset button on the data that we have within our agencies for the client. So not just assuming that we know what we know, but trying to go back and actually figure out what we see before and after of every component that we do for our clients.
Okay, thank you. Maybe one or two more if we have them. Yeah.
Hi, Eric Dory from Infolinks. So we felt that the first thing is to help evolve more human relationships between the two sides, so it's not like, oh, the data bots, oh, the creative BS people, but actually humanize their relationship through maybe team building, play, things like that. Off-site, you play dodgeball with someone, kind of humanizes things. Once you've established
Not
that...
the way we played it at St. Cyprian's.
Well, it has to be done
Not
right,
humanizing at all, but go ahead.
Right on. The next is to identify clear objectives from the start so that if there's a hardcore DR goal, the creative people can understand that when they're building the creative and not build it off point. Really having face-to-face meetings, not overly doing things through email or but getting people in the same room together. Not working in silos. And the final thing was helping analysts learn how to tell a story from the data so they're not just barfing numbers on people who don't really like numbers that much.
Yeah.
And give them the story so they can work with it and make it creative.
Fantastic, thank you. One more.
Hi, my name's Tony Lonnie from Convertro, so data is near and dear to our hearts as an attribution company, obviously. But the one that we came up with over here was that if you don't know the question, you can't possibly know the answer. And it's really important to know that you're asking the right questions, or else all the data in the world isn't going to really tell you anything. You really need to know what it is you're trying to answer.
That's really a compelling idea. I mean, sort of, get the question front and center would be the action item there. Really isolate sort of what's the question. I would build on that just a little bit, Tony, and say that I think what's missing in a lot of these conversations is a point of view. I think we're really missing sort of what's the hypothesis that we go in with. What do we think is important to begin with? That's something that Alistair talked about. And I'm actually going to quote you here as well, if I can, because I thought you had a great way of putting it in your. No, I've got it. It's in here somewhere. Alistair had a great one. He said, really, it's not about the data set. It's sort of like, how can we get more creative with big data sets by creating simple but brilliant insights that can lead to brilliant creative ideas. So I think that's the missing piece there is, without a point of view, without that central question that we believe that we need to answer, identify that as the most important question, we don't take that raw data. I mean, data is a business problem. We're all swimming and drowning in data. Rather, we need to sort of like come up with the insight, distill that data and say, what do we think it means? And then, now we have the basis on which I think we can really
I actually like the previous answer. I like that kind of like data stories. And I think this is something you were talking about, Tim, was like narrative. The ability to, we are storytellers. Everyone in here, we're all trying to actually connect that story, that brand story, with an audience. So how do we do that better? And I think narrative can play a bigger role in the entire process.
Right, so you think about how stories need data, and that kind of puts creatives on the defensive. But if you think in terms that data needs stories, there's an opportunity for creatives to help tell that story.
Couldn't agree more. We have time for one more. Anyone? Bueller? Over here, yeah.
Run, Forrest.
Adam Kleinberg from Traction. So we talked a lot about the briefing process and just, having an integrated creative brief from day one, and really just, I mean, it's not brain surgery how to do this. It's just like having people in the same room and talking, like I've been, and having a good strong brief at the beginning that's told like artfully, that is a story in and of itself. Like, how do you use this data points instead of just shoving crap into a template? Make it about like, how do you inspire both teams to work together to really create great ideas? I'm a creative as well. I'm a designer, and I've worked at a lot of agencies, and I've seen a lot of briefs, and most are really, really bad. Most. And I think that is really something to focus on. If you can really pull something together that's meant to inspire and takes data and doesn't just use it as statistics or, but really helps inspire a vision, that's how you ultimately create success. And then having those checkpoints throughout the process, just to get people, reconnecting, and how do we keep moving it forward together? And those could be 1 hour meetings, like at 3 points during the process. It doesn't have to be incredibly expensive.
It's interesting. It's interesting how kind of shit rolls downhill, because on the agency side, you guys complain about the briefs you get from the clients, and then you sort of distill those and you turn them into RFPs that go out to the sellers in the room, and they complain about the quality of those. So I'll kind of say the same advice that I give to salespeople. I'll kind of sort of iterate that, talk about if you don't like the briefs you're getting, then start writing the next one.
Yeah, but I'm not talking about client briefs. I'm talking about briefs that agencies write.
Okay.
Like
so it's kind of a self-inflicted wound, then, is it?
Yeah, I think so.
All right. So thank you for this, by the way. The pages that you guys wrote, I hope you took the time to sort of distill these ideas. We're actually going to collect those and sort of put together a bit of a quilt here with some of the ideas about this, and sort of we're not sure what we're going to do with it yet, but we're going to somehow turn that around, and maybe it comes back to you as a best practices case.
And you can buy it in the iMedia shop.
You can buy it in the iMedia shop, yes,
Nice
exactly.
quilt.
Right next to the new iMedia band, it shows you how much smarter you're getting.
That's good.
You know, as the conference goes on. So we are running down to the last few minutes here. So I want to talk a little bit about the client in all this, because, and frankly, for those of you, raise your hand if you're a seller or an external provider to this process, because we've talked a lot here so far about agency this and sort of getting along inside the agency sort of pipeline. What I want to take a second here and kind of isolate is the fact that a lot of sellers come to clients with great integrated thinking, sort of like we're tying together sort of what they're going to do creatively with the data that's possible, with the vehicle and so forth. And then something really crappy happens, The client says, great, go see my media agency with this, go see my creative agency with that, and sort of you descend into this sort of, the set of streams that is non-productive, right? Nobody gets along. It becomes very balkanized very fast. So my question for both of you is, where does the client figure into all of this? Does the client have to be sort of the chief integration officer to keep these two sides together? And if so, how do we empower them in that role?
Well, clients should never outsource strategy, so it starts with that. And then I think it's a function of what your view is as a company serving them. So if you're an integrated agency, I think you're probably a bit better positioned to to control it all. If you're not, then you've got to find a way to work closely with the client to make sure that this gentleman back here really had it right. Know your destination, right? All winds are favorable if you don't know where you're sailing, right? So focus on the destination and drive your meetings and your commentary and your messages and your strategy around that.
Okay. Where does the client factor in?
In different ways, my experience. I'm just thinking about it for the previous month. Some of our clients are actually fully integrated. Sometimes we work with outside media agencies. And sometimes it's very positive, sometimes it's negative, and I'm just talking about the full-on integration. A great client, like Tim points out, will actually know where we're actually trying to head, and as long as we can actually agree where we're all going and what success looks like, I think that really helps. When you don't have those clear metrics for success, I think things get really fucked up really quickly, and then you end up with lots and lots of different agencies all fighting over their own revenue streams.
Yeah, that sort of, as I was looking ahead into the content for the rest of the conference, I know that tomorrow they're going to sort of queue up like how best to present sort of, data and analytical stuff to creatives and so forth. And it seems like the client is having to work pretty hard just to keep their kids from fighting. Mm-hmm. Right?
I definitely agree with that.
This shouldn't be this difficult. But I think that kind of what's missing is that in the agency world, and I know that there's a lot of great people are here because they want to change this picture. In the agency world, I think that there's too much sort of protecting your turf, and obviously you're going to be concerned about losing the business or losing influence with the client and so forth. So it becomes this vicious cycle of kind of protecting the metrics, coming up with the simplest, easiest story to sort of show attribution and lift and so forth. But I think, as is the case with most business problems, what's really missing to pull us out of this is a sense of leadership. Mm-hmm. That intellectual leadership and that vision to sort of get us to that next place. So I'm going to ask you each to close with an example of, how data and creativity have worked together in the past or how they should work. So give us either a case study or a model for excellence, like a thread of excellence that you see in the business. Alistair, we'll start with you.
I'm not going to use the Nike Fuel Band. There's a thing called the slavery footprint. Has anyone seen that? It's really interesting. It was done by a production company called Unit 9. It's worth just Googling Unit 9 slavery footprint. It's this very simple website where you can find out how your consumption habits now basically keep people in slavery or slavery within Africa, third world nation. It's actually really very, very fascinating for me. Mm-hmm. It's based on that idea, that insight that essentially you don't know what's going on, and through data we can actually uncover these truths about our modern consumption habits.
Mm-hmm. Great.
In the spirit of looking through the windshield, I think thinking about data as a means to inform what might be with creative is a really good formula to think about. And when I think about what might be, I think about lifestyle and I think about affinities. So if I had better perspective into whether people were price sensitive, whether they were scared, whether they were optimistic, whether they were, had a fashion sense, and if I knew their relative affinity to my brand and competitive brand, that gives you this rich palette of insight that allows you to be a whole lot smarter about what you say. And there are lots and lots of great sources of that. And as you contemplate, I recommend you choose alphabetically.
Nice. And I'll use the moderator's prerogative. And first thanking both these guys for extraordinarily generous devotion of their time in preparing, and the candor that you guys brought. So absolutely terrific. I'll let you give them a round of applause when we close up here. But I'll close with one final comment. And that is the two most powerful words that we can ask to ourselves as either creatives or as data providers. Really simple, powerful two words: so what? So what? It forces us to pursue meaning, and ultimately from meaning comes a point of view. From that point of view comes leadership. And that's what I think gets us out of this. So round of applause for our guests. Thank you, guys.